I was very lucky in about 91 or 92, whichever year Farnborough was, got my hands on a flanker.
I was just about to ask you that. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, it was superb. So myself and one of the other pilots on the squadron were sitting in Fast Jet Test Squadron at the time, and the boss, Nigel Wood, came in and said, you two are going off to Farnborough next week to fly a Su-27. And bearing in mind this is shortly after the end of the Cold War, we didn't know really anything about the aeroplane, apart from the grainy intelligence brief pictures that we'd seen towards the end of the Cold War. And the story was that Sukhoi were displaying the aircraft at Farnborough. They were interested in trying to market the aeroplane now that the Cold War had ended, market it internationally. And BAE Systems had been approached by Sukhoi to see if they would help them do that. And BAE Systems said, we'd like to fly the aeroplane then. And Sukhoi said yes. So BAE Systems then approached the Ministry of Defence and said, after the Farnborough Air Show's finished, we'd like to fly their aircraft. And the MOD said, you can do that, but 2 of our test pilots are going to fly it as well.
Wow.
So 4 of us actually ended up going down to Farnborough the following week. 2 BAE Systems guys and myself and a colleague from Boscombe Down. And we met Yevgeny Frolov, who was the Sukhoi test pilot, and I think Mr. Simonov, if my memory is correct, who was Sukhoi designer.
Okay.
And we had a series of briefs with them about flying the aeroplane. Interesting, because it was clear that their initial impression was that we were going to sit in the back and have a ride, and that was not our aim at all. Our aim was that all 4 of us were going to fly the aeroplane, we were going to fly it from the front, and we were going to do everything with a Su-27 that you could do with a Su-27, and then we were going to write reports. So between the 4 of us, we kind of came up with a test plan that did everything we could think of. Sukhoi agreed. We briefed, we had an interpreter. The Russians didn't speak English, the interpreter didn't speak any technical English, so by the time I climbed up into the front of the aeroplane to go fly, I really knew nothing about it. Yevgeny jumped in the back, he didn't really speak English, in fact he didn't speak English. So although he was there, it ended up virtually being a solo trip. A testimony to the aeroplane, it was very, very easy from a start-up taxi, checks point of view, very, very easy. Everything colour-coded in the cockpit, so nothing really to remember. Airborne, completely carefree, don't worry about limits. The aircraft will look after itself, the engines will look after themselves. Coming from the Tornado, which is the world's biggest book of limits to memorise, it was a bit of a revelation actually, so very, very easy aeroplane to fly. And I was lucky because on my trip, the part of the test plan that I'd got was to go low flying down through Devon and Cornwall, assess the aeroplane at low level, and then pop up near Boscombe Down, meet up with Andy Young, who was airborne from Boscombe Down in a Hawk, and do some visual air combat with a Hawk. So we did some close formation, then we did some visual air combat. And bearing in mind the flanker is a really big, heavy aeroplane.
It's big.
I could not believe how quickly I was beating the Hawk in visual combat.
No way, really?
And you would not beat a Hawk in visual combat with a Tornado.
Wow.
Not in visual combat. In beyond visual range combat, obviously, but visual combat, close in, knife fight in a phone booth, you would not beat a Hawk. Flanker, I was beating him very easily, and it wasn't until I just took a couple of minutes, because the aeroplane was all in kilometres per hour in terms of speed.
Okay.
So when I did the mental conversions, I realised I was getting about 6G out of the aircraft at about 270 knots, which is a very small turn. And that's why I was beating it. And even to get 6G out of a Hawk, you'd probably need 400 knots. So very, very small turns. But just a delight to fly the aircraft. Not as fast as an F3, you'd be pleased to hear. I tried it at 2,000 feet to see how fast it would go. It was not as fast as an F3. But in terms of handling qualities and ease of operation, it was an absolute dream. I loved it. And we said to the designer afterwards, I'm sure his name was Mr. Frolov, we said to him afterwards, you've built a beautiful aeroplane that's very, very easy to fly. And he said it has to be easy to fly because our pilots get very, very few hours.
Right.
almost a design feature of the aircraft.
So you were honest with it, you weren't going to say it's rubbish, were you? Like, you were actually honest. So what were the engines like? Were they powerful?
Yeah, they were powerful. They were powerful, and like I said, they were carefree, so didn't have to worry about them. So I managed to ask Yevgeny in the back if he would show me his famous Cobra manoeuvre from the air show.
Yes.
So he did that, and you know, to trust engines to put up with that kind of abuse in terms of angle of attack and all the rest of it at low speed at high power settings is quite something. The engines didn't miss a beat.
And is that the Cobra manoeuvre actually useful in combat, or is it just a party trick?
People will have different opinions on that. My own view is it's a bit of a party trick, probably because of my background on the Phantom and then the Tornado. I'm a great believer in speed is life. I think once you get that slow in combat, your days are numbered, personally.
Mm-hmm.